Marcus Thompson pushed open the barn door and froze. A massive white horse stood trembling in the darkness, wrapped in rusted chains so tight they had carved permanent grooves into its flesh after 10 years of abandonment. In that moment, the decorated combat veteran made a decision that would either save them both or destroy everything he had left. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning mist clung to the overgrown fields like a shroud as Marcus Thompson pulled his old pickup truck onto the rutted dirt road that led to the abandoned Harrison property. At 62 years old, Marcus carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had seen too much and said too little. The lines etched deep into his weathered face told stories of distant battlefields and sleepless nights, of brothers lost and promises kept. His silver beard, neatly trimmed despite his modest circumstances, caught the early sunlight as he stepped out of the truck, his military boots crunching on the gravel. Marcus had returned to his hometown of Millbrook 3 years ago, seeking the peace that had eluded him for decades. The small rural community nestled in the hill country had once been his sanctuary, a place where life moved at the gentle pace of the seasons and neighbors still knew each other's names. But the town had changed. Farms had been abandoned, families had moved away seeking better opportunities in the cities, and the landscape was dotted with decaying barns and forgotten homesteads that stood as monuments to a dying way of life. The Harrison place had been empty for nearly a decade, ever since old Samuel Harrison passed away, and his children, scattered across the country, couldn't agree on what to do with the property. The main house, once a proud 2-story farmhouse with white columns and a wraparound porch, now sagged under the weight of neglect. Broken windows stared out like hollow eyes, and vines had claimed the walls as their own. But it wasn't the house that had drawn Marcus here on this particular morning. 2 days ago, while having coffee at Martha's Diner on Main Street, Marcus had overheard a conversation between 2 teenagers who had been exploring the abandoned property. They spoke in hushed, excited tones about strange sounds coming from the old barn, deep bellowing noises that echoed through the structure in the dead of night. Most folks dismissed it as the wind playing tricks, or perhaps wild animals that had taken up residence in the empty buildings. But something about their description had stirred something in Marcus, a feeling he couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore. As he walked toward the massive red barn that stood about 200 yards from the main house, Marcus felt the familiar weight of his service weapon on his hip, a habit from his years in the military that he'd never quite shaken. The barn loomed larger with each step, its once vibrant paint now faded and peeling, revealing the weathered gray wood beneath. The massive sliding door hung askew on rusted tracks, and the entire structure seemed to lean slightly to one side, as if tired from holding up against time and the elements. The sounds hit him first, a low, desperate whinny that seemed to carry the weight of years of suffering. Then the unmistakable clang of heavy chains. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, that old combat instinct that never quite left him, the one that had saved his life more times than he cared to count. He approached the door cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon before he caught himself. Whatever was inside that barn wasn't a threat to him, he realized. It was something that needed help. With considerable effort, Marcus managed to slide the heavy door open enough to slip inside. The interior was dim, lit only by streams of dusty sunlight that filtered through gaps in the walls and roof. The air was thick with the smell of old hay, mold, and something else, something animal and primal. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Marcus saw it. In the far corner of the barn, surrounded by years of accumulated filth and debris, stood the most magnificent and heartbreaking sight he had ever witnessed. The horse was enormous, easily 17 hands high, with a massive frame that spoke of powerful draft horse bloodlines. Its coat, which must have once been a brilliant white or cream color, was now matted and gray with dirt. The animal's mane, long and tangled, hung in thick ropes that had never known a brush. But it was the chains that made Marcus's blood run cold. Heavy iron chains, the kind that might be used to secure machinery or anchor ships, were wrapped around the horse's massive neck and secured to a thick support beam. More chains bound its legs, limiting its movement to a small circle in the corner of the barn. The concrete floor around the horse was cracked and stained, evidence of years of standing in one place. The horse's eyes, dark and deep as ancient wells, locked onto Marcus. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition that transcended species. Marcus saw in those eyes what he had seen in the mirror too many times, the look of a soul that had been broken by circumstances beyond its control, yet somehow still held on to a fragile thread of hope. The horse's ribs showed clearly beneath its matted coat, and its hooves, overgrown and cracked, spoke of years without proper care. Marcus stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced enemy fire, had held dying men in his arms, had witnessed atrocities that haunted his dreams, but the sight of this magnificent creature, imprisoned and forgotten in this dark barn for who knew how long, struck him with a force that left him breathless. The horse made no move to approach him, simply stood there trembling slightly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might bring punishment. "How long have you been here, old friend?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "How long has it been since someone showed you kindness?" As if in answer, the horse let out another low whinny, a sound so full of loneliness and desperation that it seemed to echo off the barn walls and settle deep in Marcus's chest. In that moment, looking into the eyes of this forgotten giant, Marcus Thompson made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He didn't know who had done this or why, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This horse would not spend another day in chains. The veteran who had spent years following orders, who had been trained to assess situations logically and act with military precision, felt something shift inside him. This wasn't a mission assigned by a superior officer. This wasn't about duty or honor or following protocol. This was about something more fundamental, more human. This was about recognizing suffering and having the courage to do something about it, no matter the cost. Marcus took a step forward, then another. The horse's ears twitched, and it shifted its weight nervously, the chains rattling with the movement. "Easy now," Marcus said softly, his voice taking on the calm, steady tone he'd used countless times to comfort frightened soldiers under his command. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus knew that helping this horse wouldn't be as simple as just removing the chains. The animal had been confined here for years, possibly a decade according to how long the property had been abandoned. It would be traumatized, possibly aggressive, certainly malnourished and weak. The practical part of Marcus's mind began cataloging everything that would need to be done. He would need tools to cut through those chains, a veterinarian to assess the horse's health, food and water, shelter and time. Lots of time. The logical thing to do would be to call animal control, to let the authorities handle it. But Marcus had seen how overwhelmed the local animal services were, understaffed and underfunded. This horse needed help now, not after bureaucratic red tape had been navigated. Besides, there was something about this moment, standing in this abandoned barn with this suffering creature, that felt like destiny, as if all the pain and loss Marcus had experienced in his life had led him to this exact place, at this exact time, to meet this horse that needed him as much as he was beginning to realize he needed it. Marcus backed slowly out of the barn, never taking his eyes off the horse until he reached the doorway. His mind was already racing, creating a mental checklist of everything he would need. The chains looked industrial grade, far too thick to cut with ordinary tools. He would need bolt cutters, heavy-duty ones, maybe even a hacksaw. But first things first. The horse needed water immediately, and probably food, though he'd have to be careful about that. An animal that had been starving couldn't be given too much food too quickly without risking serious health complications. He jogged back to his truck, his joints protesting the sudden movement. Age and old injuries had a way of reminding him that he wasn't the young soldier he used to be. From behind the seat, he pulled out a large plastic container he kept for emergencies and filled it from the water jug he always carried. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for now. He also grabbed an old blanket, some rope, and a flashlight. As an afterthought, he took the sandwich he'd packed for lunch. If he needed to gain the horse's trust, food might help. When Marcus returned to the barn, the horse was still standing in the same position, as if it had learned long ago that struggling against the chains was useless. Marcus set down the water container just inside the door and approached slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. Over the years, he had learned that tone mattered more than words when it came to frightened creatures, whether they were spooked horses or shell-shocked soldiers. The horse watched him with those deep, knowing eyes, its massive head lowered slightly in a posture that spoke of resignation rather than aggression. "It's okay, big guy," Marcus said softly as he inched closer. "I know you've been hurt. I know you've been alone for a long time, but I promise you, those days are over. I'm going to get you out of here." The horse's nostrils flared, taking in Marcus's scent. Its ears, partially hidden beneath the tangled mane, twitched forward slightly, a sign that it was listening, processing. Marcus had been around horses as a boy, back when his grandfather still worked a small farm outside of town. He remembered the gentle giants that pulled plows and carried riders, remembered how intelligent and sensitive they could be, but he'd never seen a horse quite like this one. Even in its current state, there was something regal about it, something that suggested this was no ordinary farm horse. Marcus knelt down about 10 feet away from the horse, making himself smaller, less threatening. He pulled out the sandwich, unwrapped it, and tore off a piece of bread. "See this?" he said, holding it out on his open palm. "I bet you're hungry. I bet you haven't had a decent meal in forever." The horse's eyes fixed on the bread, but it didn't move. Years of confinement had taught it not to expect good things from humans. Patience, Marcus reminded himself. Patience had kept him alive in the desert, had helped him survive missions that should have been his last. He could be patient now. He set the piece of bread on the ground and slowly pushed it toward the horse with a stick he found nearby. The horse's neck stretched forward, its chains clinking, and after a long moment of hesitation, it lowered its massive head and delicately picked up the bread with its lips. The sight of those gentle movements, so at odds with the creature's enormous size and obvious suffering, nearly broke Marcus's heart. "Good boy," Marcus whispered. "That's it. I'm your friend." He repeated the process several times, each time placing the bread a little closer to himself, until finally the horse was near enough that Marcus could have reached out and touched it. But he didn't. Not yet. Trust took time, and this horse had every reason not to trust humans. Instead, Marcus slowly stood and retrieved the water container. He poured some into a dusty bucket he found in the corner, then set it down within the horse's reach. The horse drank deeply, desperately, water splashing over the sides of the bucket and darkening the concrete floor. Marcus watched as the animal's throat worked, swallowing gulp after gulp. How long had it been since this horse had clean, fresh water? Days? Weeks? The thought made Marcus's jaw clench with anger. What kind of person could do this? What kind of monster could chain a living creature and leave it to suffer in darkness? As the horse drank, Marcus examined the chains more closely. They were old but solid, secured with heavy padlocks that had rusted over time but still held firm. The chains around the horse's neck had rubbed away the hair, leaving raw, calloused skin beneath. The leg chains were even worse, having cut into the flesh in places, leaving scars that spoke of countless attempts to break free. Marcus felt his hands curl into fists. He had seen cruelty before, had witnessed the depths of human evil in war zones across the world. But somehow, this senseless suffering of an innocent animal struck him differently. After the horse had finished drinking, Marcus backed away again and pulled out his cell phone. The signal was weak out here, but it was enough. He dialed the number for Tom Henderson, a local handyman he'd hired a few times to fix things around his small rental house. Tom answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly and suspicious. "Tom, it's Marcus Thompson. I need your help with something, and I need it today. Marcus, I'm pretty busy, man. Got 3 jobs lined up, and I'll pay you double your usual rate. Cash, I need heavy-duty bolt cutters, a hacksaw, and any other tools you've got for cutting through thick chains, and I need you to bring them to the old Harrison property. Now." There was a pause on the other end. "What are you into, Marcus? That place has been abandoned for years." "Nothing illegal," Marcus assured him, "but there's a horse here that's been chained up and forgotten. It's in bad shape, Tom. Real bad. I need to get it free, and I can't do it without the right tools." Another pause, longer this time. Then Tom's voice came back, softer. "A horse? Someone left a horse chained up? For years, from the looks of it." Tom cursed under his breath. "Give me an hour. I'll bring everything I've got." "Thank you, Tom. This means more than you know." Marcus ended the call and turned back to the horse. 1 hour. He could wait 1 hour. In the meantime, he would stay here, let the horse get used to his presence, start building the bridge of trust that would be necessary for what came next, because freeing the horse from its chains was just the first step. The real challenge would be helping it remember what it meant to be free, to trust again, to live without fear. The horse had finished the water and now stood watching Marcus with what seemed like cautious curiosity. Marcus moved slowly toward the entrance of the barn, testing whether the horse would react to his movements. The chains allowed it perhaps 20 feet of movement in any direction from the support beam, though it clearly hadn't moved much in a very long time. Marcus grabbed an old wooden crate and dragged it over to a spot where he could sit and still maintain a respectful distance. "I served in the military for 23 years, Marcus said aloud, his voice echoing softly in the barn. "Did 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. Saw things that no person should have to see. When I came home, people called me a hero, but I never felt like one. Heroes save people. I just tried to survive." The horse's ears swiveled toward him, tracking his voice. Marcus continued, finding it oddly comforting to speak his thoughts aloud to this silent, suffering creature. "Maybe that's why I understand you," he said. "We've both been through hell. We've both been trapped by things beyond our control. We've both wondered if anyone would ever come to save us." Tom Henderson arrived 47 minutes later, his old Ford truck rumbling up the overgrown driveway with a trailer rattling behind it. Marcus heard the engine long before he saw the vehicle, and he walked out of the barn to meet him. Tom was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with arms like tree trunks and hands that were permanently stained with grease and calluses. He climbed out of the truck, his face serious, and started unloading tools from the bed without saying a word. Marcus noticed that Tom had brought more than just bolt cutters. There were hacksaws, a portable angle grinder with extra blades, heavy work gloves, safety goggles, and even a first aid kit. Tom caught Marcus looking at the supplies and shrugged. "Figured we might need options. Those chains could be anything from simple steel to hardened alloy. Won't know till we try cutting them. I appreciate this, Tom. More than you know." Tom nodded toward the barn. "How bad is it? See for yourself." The 2 men walked into the barn together, and Marcus watched as Tom's expression changed from curiosity to shock to barely contained rage. The handyman stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the enormous chained horse. "Sweet Jesus," he breathed. Who would do something like this? That's what I'd like to know, Marcus replied grimly. But right now, finding out who did it matters less than getting this animal free. Tom approached slowly, and Marcus noted with satisfaction that the other man instinctively understood not to make sudden movements or loud noises. The horse tracked Tom with its eyes but didn't react with fear, perhaps sensing that these two men meant no harm. Tom walked around the horse in a wide circle, examining the chains, the condition of the animal, the setup of the restraints. When he completed his inspection, his jaw was set tight. "This horse has been here a long time," Tom said quietly. "Years, I'd guess. Look at how the chains have worn grooves into the beam. Look at the hooves. They haven't been trimmed in forever. This animal should barely be able to stand, let alone still be alive." "But it is alive," Marcus said, "and we're going to make sure it stays that way." Tom pulled on his work gloves and picked up the largest bolt cutters. "Let's start with the leg chains. If we can get those off, at least the horse will have some mobility. Then we tackle the neck chain. That one's going to be tougher because we need to be careful not to spook it while we're working so close to its head." Marcus nodded and pulled on his own pair of gloves. He positioned himself near the horse's shoulder, speaking softly to keep it calm. "Easy now, big guy. We're going to help you. This might make some noise, but don't be afraid. We're not going to hurt you." Tom positioned the bolt cutters on the first leg chain and squeezed with all his strength. The muscles in his arms bulged, and his face reddened with effort, but the chain held firm. He released the cutters, repositioned them, and tried again. This time there was a small groan of metal, but still no break. "Hardened steel," Tom muttered. "We're going to need the grinder." He retrieved the angle grinder and a heavy-duty extension cord that he'd brought, running the cord back to a portable generator in his truck. The generator coughed to life, and Tom returned with the grinder humming in his hands. "This is going to be loud," he warned Marcus. "Keep that horse calm if you can." Marcus moved closer to the horse, placing his hand gently on its neck for the first time. The horse's skin quivered under his touch, and he felt the rapid beating of its heart through the matted coat. "I've got you," Marcus whispered. "I won't let anything bad happen to you." The angle grinder screamed to life, sending up a shower of sparks as Tom pressed it against the chain. The horse jerked violently, trying to back away, but the chains held it in place. Marcus maintained his position, his hand steady on the horse's neck, his voice a constant stream of reassurance. It's okay, we're almost there. Just a little more. You're so brave. You're doing so good." The first chain snapped with a sharp crack that echoed through the barn. The horse's front right leg was suddenly free, and it stumbled slightly, unused to the lack of restraint. Tom immediately moved to the next leg chain while Marcus stayed close to the horse's head, maintaining that crucial physical contact. The second chain took longer, the angle grinder's blade wearing down as it bit through the thick metal. Tom had to stop twice to change blades, and each time Marcus felt the horse tense beneath his hand. When the second front leg chain broke, the horse took a tentative step forward, the first real movement it had made in who knew how long. Its legs trembled, muscles unused to bearing weight without the constant pressure of restraints. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as he watched the animal's confusion and wonder at this small taste of freedom. Tom worked methodically through the remaining leg chains. Each one was a battle against time-hardened metal, but the handyman was relentless. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air, and his arms shook from the effort, but he didn't stop. When the final leg chain fell away, leaving only the massive collar around the horse's neck, both men paused to catch their breath. The horse stood there, four legs free for the first time in a decade, swaying slightly as if unsure what to do with this newfound mobility. It took a step, then another, testing the limits of its remaining restraint. The neck chain was long enough to allow it perhaps 30 feet of movement, but after so many years of being unable to move at all, even this small freedom seemed to overwhelm the animal. Tom set down the grinder and wiped his face with a rag. The neck chain is the tricky part. We need to get it off, but we also need to make sure the horse doesn't panic and hurt itself or us in the process. Marcus studied the collar. It was made of 3 separate chains wrapped together and secured with 2 heavy padlocks at a central point. The chains had rubbed the horse's neck raw in places, and Marcus could see old scars where the skin had healed over and over again. His hands clenched into fists at the sight. "We can do this," Marcus said with quiet determination. "We've come this far. We're not stopping now." Tom nodded and picked up the grinder again. "I'll cut the chains on either side of the locks. That way we can pull the whole thing off in pieces. But Marcus, you need to be ready. Once this horse is completely free, we don't know how it's going to react. It might bolt. It might collapse. It might even try to fight." "I'll be ready," Marcus assured him. "This horse has fought to survive for 10 years in this hell. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it together." Marcus positioned himself at the horse's head, his hands gently cupping the massive jaw, looking directly into those deep, ancient eyes. "Listen to me," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're scared. I know you don't understand what's happening, but I need you to trust me just for a few more minutes. Can you do that? Can you trust me?" The horse's breath came in warm puffs against Marcus's face, and for a moment, they simply stood there, man and beast, connected by something deeper than words. Then, almost imperceptibly, the horse lowered its head slightly, resting some of its weight against Marcus's chest. It was a gesture of surrender, of trust, and it nearly undid Marcus completely. Tom took this as his signal. He fired up the angle grinder once more, and the barn filled with the harsh scream of metal on metal. Marcus felt every muscle in the horse's body tense, felt the animal's instinct to flee, warring with its newly found trust. He pressed his forehead against the horse's face, his hands steady, his voice a constant anchor. "You're okay. I've got you. Almost there. Almost free." The first section of chain gave way, and Tom quickly moved to the other side. The sparks flew like tiny fireworks in the dim barn, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled the air. Marcus's arms ached from holding the horse steady, but he didn't let go. He couldn't let go. This animal had endured a decade of hell. The least Marcus could do was be its rock for these final moments of captivity. With a final grinding screech, the second section of chain broke free. Tom quickly shut off the grinder and helped Marcus carefully unwrap the heavy collar from around the horse's neck. The chains clattered to the ground with a sound that seemed to echo through eternity. For the first time in 10 years, the horse stood completely unbound. For a long moment, nothing happened. The horse simply stood there, trembling as if unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Marcus and Tom backed away slowly, giving the animal space to process its freedom. Then tentatively, the horse took a step forward, then another. Its legs, weak from years of disuse, shook with the effort, but the horse kept moving. It walked in a slow circle around the barn, its hooves making hollow sounds on the concrete floor. Each step seemed to bring a new realization, a new understanding. The chains were gone. The restraints were gone. It was free. Marcus watched with tears streaming down his weathered face as the magnificent creature explored its prison one last time, but now as a free being rather than a captive. Tom cleared his throat roughly and turned away, but not before Marcus saw that the handyman's eyes were also wet. "That's something I'll never forget," Tom said gruffly. "Not if I live to be 100. The horse completed its circle and walked slowly back to Marcus. It stopped directly in front of him, so close that Marcus could feel the heat radiating from its body. Then, in a gesture that would be burned into Marcus's memory forever, the horse lowered its massive head and rested it on his shoulder, a deep, shuddering sigh escaping from its chest. "You're safe now," Marcus whispered, his arms coming up to embrace the horse's neck. You're safe, and I promise you, I will never let anyone hurt you again." They stood like that for several minutes, man and horse, two souls that had found each other in the darkest of places. Finally, Marcus pulled back and looked at Tom. "We need to get a vet out here. This horse needs medical attention, proper food, and somewhere safe to recover." Tom nodded, already pulling out his phone. "I know a guy. Dr. Sarah Chen. She's about 40 minutes away, but she specializes in rescue cases. She'll come." He dialed the number and walked outside to get better reception, leaving Marcus alone with the horse. Marcus ran his hands gently over the horse's body, assessing the damage years of neglect had caused. The animal was painfully thin, each rib visible through the matted coat. The hooves were cracked and overgrown, curling up at the toes in a way that must have caused constant pain. There were sores and scabs all over its body, and the areas where the chains had been were raw and infected. This horse had suffered immeasurably, yet somehow it had survived. That fact alone spoke to an incredible will to live. Tom returned a few minutes later. "Dr. Chen is on her way. She's bringing supplies and said she'll do a full examination when she gets here. Marcus, she also said we need to think about where this horse is going to go. It can't stay here, and it's going to need months of rehabilitation." Marcus looked at the horse, then back at Tom. "It's coming home with me." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Marcus, you live in a rental house in town. You don't have a barn or pasture or any facilities for a horse, especially not one this size that needs this level of care." "Then I'll figure it out," Marcus said firmly. "I'll find a place. I'll build a shelter if I have to. But I'm not abandoning this horse, not after everything it's been through, not after it trusted me." Tom studied Marcus for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, let me make some calls. My brother-in-law has that old farm out on Route 7. The barn is still solid, and there's about 5 acres of fenced pasture. He hasn't used it in years. Maybe he'd be willing to rent it out cheap." Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest. "That would be perfect. Thank you, Tom." While they waited for the vet to arrive, Marcus made several more trips to his truck to bring water and what food he had. He knew better than to give the horse too much too quickly, but he offered small handfuls of the apple he'd had in his lunch bag. The horse accepted each piece delicately, as if afraid that sudden movement might make the food disappear. Tom, meanwhile, was on his phone making call after call. Marcus heard him negotiating with his brother-in-law, then calling feed stores, then tracking down someone who could deliver hay. The handyman had transformed from a simple hired help into a full partner in this rescue mission, and Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had dropped everything to help save a suffering animal. As they waited, Marcus told the horse about the life that was waiting for it. "You're going to have a real home," he promised. "Fresh grass to eat, clean water, a warm barn, and I'll be there every single day. I'll brush your coat until it shines again. We'll get your hooves fixed. We'll heal those sores, and someday when you're ready, maybe we'll go for walks together. Would you like that?" The horse's ears swiveled toward him, listening to every word. Marcus smiled, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived in a white truck with a veterinary symbol painted on the side, pulling up to the barn with the efficiency of someone who had responded to countless emergencies. She was a woman in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of calm competence that immediately put Marcus at ease. She stepped out of the truck wearing practical work clothes and boots, her long black hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and began unloading equipment before she even introduced herself. "You must be Marcus," she said, extending a hand. "Tom filled me in on the basics during the drive. Where's the patient?" Marcus led her into the barn, and he watched as her professional demeanor faltered for just a moment when she saw the horse. Her eyes widened and she let out a slow breath. "Dear God," she whispered. Then her training kicked in, and she approached the horse with careful, measured steps, her voice soft and soothing. "Hey there, beautiful," Dr. Chen said gently. "I know you've had a rough time. I'm just going to take a look at you, okay? I promise to be as gentle as I can." The horse watched her warily but didn't retreat. Perhaps it sensed that this woman, like Marcus and Tom, meant no harm. Dr. Chen spent the next several minutes simply standing near the horse, letting it become accustomed to her presence before she began her examination. Marcus appreciated her patience, her understanding that this animal had earned the right to be approached with respect and care. Finally, Dr. Chen began her assessment. She ran her hands along the horse's body, checking bone structure, muscle tone, and overall condition. She examined the eyes, the teeth, the ears. She lifted each hoof in turn, wincing at the severe overgrowth and cracking. She carefully inspected the wounds where the chains had rubbed, taking samples for testing. Throughout the examination, she kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation with the horse, explaining what she was doing, as if the animal could understand every word. After nearly an hour, Dr. Chen stepped back and turned to Marcus and Tom. Her expression was serious. "Okay, here's what we're dealing with. This is a draft horse, probably a Percheron or Percheron mix, approximately 12 to 15 years old based on the teeth. Male, gelded. The good news is that despite everything this poor animal has been through, his basic organs seem to be functioning. His heart is strong, his lungs are clear, and he's mentally alert." She paused, and Marcus braced himself for the bad news he knew was coming. The bad news is extensive. He's severely malnourished, probably weighing about 800 pounds less than he should. The hooves are in terrible condition and will require immediate attention from a farrier. I'm talking months of corrective trimming and possibly special shoes. The chain wounds are infected and will need aggressive antibiotic treatment. He has parasites, which we expected. His coat is so matted that we'll probably need to clip most of it off to treat the skin conditions underneath. And gentlemen, after 10 years of limited movement, his muscles have atrophied significantly. Physical therapy will be essential. Tom let out a low whistle. "That's a long recovery." Dr. Chen nodded. "Months, possibly a year or more for full rehabilitation. And that's if everything goes right. There could be complications we haven't discovered yet. Internal damage from malnutrition, joint problems from standing in one position for so long, psychological trauma that could manifest as aggression or depression." She looked directly at Marcus. "This is going to be expensive. The medications alone will run into thousands of dollars. Then there's farrier work, special feed, supplements, and regular vet visits. Are you prepared for that commitment?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes. I don't care about the cost." Dr. Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Okay then, let's get started. I'm going to give him a full course of antibiotics, deworm him, and treat the worst of the wounds today. I'll also give you detailed instructions for his care. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This horse cannot be moved far in his current condition. Even a short trailer ride could be dangerous, given how weak he is." Tom spoke up. "My brother-in-law's farm is about 12 miles from here. Think he could make that?" Dr. Chen considered. 12 miles? In a trailer? She looked at the horse thoughtfully. "If we take it very slow, pad the trailer well, and I follow behind to monitor maybe. But honestly, I'd prefer to keep him here for at least a few days while we get some food and fluids into him, stabilize him a bit." Marcus shook his head. "I'm not leaving him here, not in this barn, not where he suffered for so long." The vet seemed to understand. She pulled out her phone and made a call. After a brief conversation, she hung up and turned back to Marcus. "I have a colleague who owes me a favor. He has a mobile veterinary unit, basically a small barn on wheels. We can bring it here, set it up next to this barn, and transfer the horse just a few feet. He can stay there for a week or so while we build up his strength. Then we move him to the permanent location." Marcus felt relief wash over him. That would be perfect. Over the next several hours, Dr. Chen worked methodically to begin treating the horse. She cleaned and dressed the chain wounds, administered injections, and carefully examined every inch of the animal's body. Marcus stayed close throughout, his presence seeming to calm the horse whenever it showed signs of stress. Tom made himself useful by cleaning out a section of the barn, bringing in fresh straw, and ensuring there was plenty of clean water available. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the barn's broken walls, Dr. Chen packed up her equipment. "The mobile unit will be here tomorrow morning," she said. "In the meantime, I want someone with this horse at all times. He's stable, but his condition is still critical. Any sudden change could be dangerous." "I'll stay," Marcus said immediately. "I'll stay right here with him tonight." Tom nodded. "I'll bring you some supplies, blankets, food, a camp chair, and I'll spell you in the morning so you can get some rest." Marcus wanted to protest that he didn't need rest, but he recognized the wisdom in Tom's words. This was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. He needed to pace himself if he was going to be any good to this horse in the long run. After Tom and Dr. Chen left, Marcus set up his makeshift camp in the barn. He had a sleeping bag, a battery-powered lantern, and the sandwich makings Tom had brought him. But he barely touched the food. Instead, he sat on the old crate, watching the horse as darkness fell over the abandoned property. The horse had settled down in the fresh straw Tom had laid out, its massive body finally relaxing after the stress of the day. In the soft light of the lantern, Marcus could see the rise and fall of its breathing, steady and calm. He thought about all the nights this horse had spent alone in the dark, chained and suffering, with no one to comfort it or tell it that everything would be okay. "Not anymore," Marcus said quietly into the darkness. "You're not alone anymore, friend. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." That first night in the barn was one of the longest of Marcus's life, and he had endured many long nights in his years of service. Every sound made him alert. Every movement from the horse brought him to his feet. Around midnight, the horse began to show signs of distress, shifting restlessly and making low, anxious sounds. Marcus approached slowly, speaking in soft tones, and placed his hand on the animal's shoulder. The horse quieted almost immediately, as if that simple human touch was all it needed to feel safe. Marcus found himself talking to the horse throughout the night, sharing stories he had never told another living soul. He talked about his time in the service, about the friends he'd lost, about the weight of coming home to a world that didn't understand what he'd been through. He talked about his struggles with nightmares, with the sounds that triggered memories, with the feeling of being lost in a place that should have felt like home. "You know what it's like, don't you?" Marcus said, as dawn began to break through the cracks in the barn walls. "You know what it's like to be trapped, to hurt in ways that no one else can see, but we're going to get through this together, you and me. We're going to show everyone what survival looks like." By the time Tom arrived with coffee and breakfast, Marcus felt a bone-deep exhaustion, but also a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The horse was still alive, still breathing steadily, and that felt like a victory in itself. Tom took one look at Marcus's haggard face and insisted he go home to shower and rest, promising to stay with the horse until Marcus returned. Reluctantly, Marcus agreed. But as he drove away from the Harrison property, he found himself already planning his return, already counting the hours until he could be back with the horse. He realized with a start that he hadn't felt this sense of purpose, this sense of being needed, since he'd left the military. The horse had given him something precious, something he'd been searching for without even knowing it. A reason to get up in the morning, a mission that mattered. When Marcus returned 3 hours later, freshly showered and carrying supplies, he found Tom sitting outside the barn on an overturned bucket, talking on his phone. The handyman waved as Marcus approached, then ended his call with a satisfied nod. "Good news," Tom announced. "My brother-in-law agreed to rent you the property for next to nothing. He's just happy someone will be using it, and I got in touch with Mike Patterson, the best farrier in 3 counties. He's coming out next week to look at the horse's hooves. Also found a feed store that'll deliver quality hay and grain at a discount once they heard what you're doing." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Tom, I don't know how to thank you. You've gone above and beyond." Tom shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. "That horse in there deserves a chance. And honestly, Marcus, watching you with that animal yesterday, seeing the way you committed yourself to helping it, reminded me of why I got into this business in the first place. To help, to make a difference." The mobile veterinary unit arrived later that morning, a large trailer that had been converted into a fully functional temporary stable. It had climate control, rubber matting on the floors, and even small windows that let in natural light. The team that delivered it worked efficiently to set it up right next to the barn, creating a ramp that would allow the horse to walk directly from one structure to the other with minimal stress. Dr. Chen arrived shortly after to supervise the transfer. She examined the horse first, checking his vital signs and looking pleased with what she found. He made it through the night, which is a very good sign. His temperature is normal, and the infection in the wounds hasn't spread. Let's get him moved to more comfortable accommodations. The transfer was tense. Marcus led the horse slowly, speaking constantly while Dr. Chen walked alongside, monitoring for any signs of distress. The horse's steps were unsteady, his legs trembling from weakness, and the unfamiliar sensation of movement after so many years of confinement. Several times he stumbled and Marcus's heart leaped into his throat, but each time the horse caught himself and continued forward. When they finally got the horse settled in the mobile unit, Marcus could see the difference immediately. The space was clean, bright, and warm. Fresh hay filled one corner, and clean water waited in a bucket secured to the wall. The horse looked around his new environment, and Marcus could have sworn he saw something like relief in those deep eyes. Over the next week, Marcus fell into a routine. He arrived at the property every morning at dawn, spending hours with the horse. He learned to clean the wounds under Dr. Chen's supervision, to prepare the special meals that would slowly rebuild the horse's strength without overwhelming his damaged digestive system. He brushed the areas of the coat that weren't too matted, speaking softly as he worked, telling the horse about the life that awaited them at the new farm. Dr. Chen visited daily, monitoring progress and adjusting treatment as needed. She taught Marcus to watch for signs of colic, to recognize when the horse was in pain versus when he was simply tired. She showed him exercises to help rebuild muscle, gentle stretches and movements that would prepare the horse for eventual mobility. The horse began to transform before Marcus's eyes. With regular food and water, a bit of brightness returned to his coat. The wounds started to heal, the infections retreating under the assault of antibiotics and careful treatment. Most importantly, the horse began to trust. He nickered softly when Marcus arrived each morning. He followed Marcus around the mobile unit with his eyes. He rested his head on Marcus's shoulder when the man sat beside him. Marcus named him Liberty. It seemed fitting for a creature that had been imprisoned for so long and was now learning what freedom meant. When he told Dr. Chen the name, she smiled approvingly. Liberty. I like it. It's a name with meaning, with hope. That's what he represents to me, Marcus said simply. Hope. Second chances. The possibility of healing even when the wounds run deep. Tom continued to visit regularly, bringing supplies and staying to help with the heavier work. Marcus learned that the handyman had spread the word around town about Liberty's rescue, and donations had started coming in. Feed stores offered discounted supplies. A local saddle shop donated brushes and grooming equipment. Even people Marcus had never met dropped off bags of carrots and apples, wanting to contribute to Liberty's recovery. The community's response moved Marcus deeply. He had spent so long feeling isolated, feeling like no one understood the battles he fought internally. But this horse, this act of rescue and rehabilitation, had connected him to his neighbors in a way nothing else had. They saw his dedication, his compassion, and they wanted to be part of something good, something healing. One evening, as Marcus sat in the mobile unit with Liberty's head resting peacefully in his lap, Tom poked his head in. "Got someone here who wants to meet you." Marcus looked up to see a young girl, maybe 10 years old, standing shyly behind Tom. She held a handmade card with a drawing of a horse on the front. "This is Emma," Tom explained. "She's been following Liberty's story. Wanted to bring him something." Emma stepped forward, her eyes wide as she looked at the massive horse. "Is he really going to be okay?" she asked in a small voice. Marcus smiled. "He's going to be better than okay. He's going to be free and happy and loved. Would you like to pet him? Like?" Emma nodded eagerly, and Marcus guided her hand to Liberty's soft nose. The horse, gentle despite his size, nuzzled the girl's palm softly. Emma's face lit up with pure joy, and Marcus felt his heart swell. Mike Patterson, the farrier, arrived on a crisp morning 2 weeks after Liberty's rescue. He was a man in his 60s with weathered hands and a reputation for being able to work miracles with damaged hooves. When he first laid eyes on Liberty's feet, he let out a low whistle and shook his head slowly. "This is some of the worst neglect I've seen in 40 years of doing this work," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Marcus stood close to Liberty, his hand on the horse's neck, ready to provide comfort if the examination became too stressful. Mike worked methodically, lifting each massive hoof and studying it from every angle. The overgrowth had caused the hooves to curl and crack, changing Liberty's entire stance and gait. Mike took measurements, made notes, and finally stood back with his hands on his hips. "Here's the reality," he said, looking Marcus straight in the eye. "These hooves didn't get this way overnight, and they won't be fixed overnight either. We're looking at months of careful, gradual correction. If we try to take off too much at once, we could lame him permanently. It's going to be a slow process, but I believe we can get him walking properly again." "How slow?" Marcus asked. "We'll start today with just cleaning and trimming the worst of the excess. Then I'll come back every 2 weeks for the next several months. Each time we'll take a little more, gradually bringing the hooves back to a natural angle. He might need special orthopedic shoes eventually, and there could be permanent damage to the internal structures that we won't know about until we get deeper into the correction." Marcus nodded, understanding. Do whatever needs to be done. He's already been through so much. Ready. A few more months of slow progress is nothing compared to 10 years of suffering. Mike got to work, and Marcus marveled at the farrier's patience and skill. He talked to Liberty constantly, explaining what he was doing, his voice a steady, calming presence. Liberty, to his credit, stood remarkably still despite his obvious discomfort. Occasionally, he would shift his weight or pull his foot back slightly, but Marcus was always there, a gentle hand and soothing voice bringing him back to calm. The transformation of even just that first trimming was remarkable. When Mike finished, Liberty stood more squarely, his weight distributed more evenly. He took a few experimental steps, and though he still moved stiffly, there was a noticeable improvement. Mike watched with satisfaction, then clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You've got yourself a fighter here. Most horses would have given up long ago. But this one, he's got heart." After Mike left, Marcus spent extra time with Liberty that afternoon, walking him slowly around the inside of the mobile unit, encouraging him to test his newly trimmed hooves. Each step Liberty took seemed to build his confidence. Marcus could see the horse beginning to understand that his body could work differently, that movement didn't have to mean pain and restriction. Dr. Chen arrived for her regular checkup and was pleased with the progress she observed. Liberty had gained almost 70 pounds in 2 weeks. His coat was starting to show hints of its natural color as Marcus worked daily to brush out the mats. and the chain wounds were healing well. She updated Liberty's treatment plan, reducing some medications while adding supplements to support hoof and joint health. "You're doing an incredible job, Marcus," she said as she packed up her equipment. "I've seen professional facilities with full staffs that don't provide this level of care. Liberty's lucky to have found you." "I'm the lucky one," Marcus replied quietly, watching Liberty contentedly munching hay in the corner. "He gave me something I didn't know I was missing." Dr. Chen smiled knowingly. "That's how rescue works. We think we're saving them, but really, they're saving us." As the third week arrived, preparations began for moving Liberty to the permanent farm. Tom and his brother-in-law, a quiet man named Robert, had been working to prepare the barn and pasture. They had repaired the stalls, reinforced the fencing, and created a special paddock area where Liberty could be gradually introduced to outdoor space without overwhelming him. Marcus visited the property with Tom to inspect the preparations. The farm was beautiful, with rolling hills and mature trees providing shade. The barn, though old, was solid and dry. Robert had even installed new lighting and fresh water lines. Standing in the barn, imagining Liberty here, Marcus felt a sense of rightness settle over him. "This is perfect," he told Robert. "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity." Robert, a man of few words, simply nodded. "That horse deserves a good home. And Tom tells me you've been living in town with no place to keep an animal. There's a small cottage on the property, been empty for years, but it's habitable. You're welcome to use it if you want. Rent would be the same." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You mean I could live here? With Liberty?" "Makes sense to me," Robert said with a shrug. "Horse needs daily care, and you're the one providing it. Might as well make it convenient." That night, Marcus lay in his rental house, unable to sleep, his mind racing with possibilities. He could live on the farm with Liberty. He could wake up every morning and walk to the barn instead of driving across town. He could be there every moment, watching Liberty's progress, ensuring he never felt abandoned again. The cottage would need work, but Marcus was handy enough. He could make it livable. The decision crystallized in his mind. He would do it. He would move to the farm, dedicate himself fully to Liberty's rehabilitation, and build a life around this second chance they had both been given. The following day, Marcus informed Tom of his decision. The handyman grinned broadly. "I was hoping you'd say that." Robert was too, though he'd never admit it. "He respects what you're doing, Marcus. We all do." Marcus began planning the move in earnest. He didn't have much to pack. His rental house had never felt like a real home anyway, and within days, he had arranged for his few belongings to be transported to the farm cottage. He gave notice to his landlord, who seemed unsurprised. "You always seemed like you belonged somewhere else," the landlord said. "Hope you find what you're looking for." "I already have," Marcus replied. The day of Liberty's move to the permanent farm arrived with perfect weather. Dr. Chen had given her approval, confident that Liberty was strong enough for the short journey. They had arranged for a large livestock trailer, specially padded and designed for comfort. Marcus led Liberty up the ramp slowly, speaking constantly, reassuring him that this was a good change, a step toward his future. Liberty balked at first, frightened by the confined space and the unfamiliar smells, but Marcus didn't rush him. He stood at the base of the ramp, one hand extended, his voice steady. "Trust me, friend. I've never let you down, and I'm not starting now." After several long minutes, Liberty took a tentative step forward, then another, until he was inside the trailer. The drive to the farm was slow and careful, Tom driving with extreme caution while Marcus rode in back with Liberty, maintaining physical contact the entire way. When they finally arrived and opened the trailer, Liberty stepped out into his new world, his eyes wide with wonder at the vast open space before him. Liberty stood at the entrance to his new barn, his massive body trembling slightly as he took in the sights and smells of freedom. Marcus remained close, his hand resting on Liberty's shoulder, letting the horse process this overwhelming new reality at his own pace. The pasture stretched out before them, green grass swaying gently in the breeze, trees providing pockets of shade, and in the distance, the hills rolled away toward the horizon. For a horse that had spent a decade seeing nothing but the inside of a dark barn, this must have seemed like another world entirely. Tom and Robert stood back, giving Liberty space, but Marcus could see the emotion on their faces as they watched the horse's reaction. After several minutes, Liberty took his first step onto the grass, then another. His damaged hooves pressed into the soft earth, and Marcus wondered if the horse even remembered what grass felt like beneath his feet. Liberty lowered his massive head and took a tentative bite of the fresh green blades, chewing slowly, as if savoring a delicacy he had forgotten existed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said softly. "This is yours now, all of it. You never have to go back to that dark place again." They spent the next hour introducing Liberty to his new environment in stages. First, they let him explore a small section of the paddock closest to the barn. Marcus walked beside him, noting how Liberty stayed close, still needing that reassurance that he wasn't alone. When Liberty seemed comfortable with that space, they gradually expanded his access, opening gates that led to larger areas. What struck Marcus most was Liberty's gentleness despite his size and his trauma. The horse moved carefully, almost daintily, as if afraid of damaging this beautiful new world he found himself in. When a bird suddenly flew up from the grass, startling him, Liberty's instinct was to move closer to Marcus rather than to bolt in panic. That simple act of seeking comfort rather than fleeing spoke volumes about the trust that had developed between them. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the pasture, Marcus led Liberty into the barn to show him his stall. Unlike the prison he had known, this stall was spacious and airy, with thick bedding, a window that looked out over the pasture, and enough room for Liberty to turn around comfortably. Marcus had spent the previous day arranging everything perfectly, hanging feed buckets at the right height, ensuring the water was fresh and plentiful, even adding a salt lick that Dr. Chen had recommended. "This is your room," Marcus explained, running his hand along Liberty's neck. "You can come and go as you please. The door will never be locked. You're free, Liberty, truly free." Liberty explored the stall thoroughly, sniffing every corner, pawing gently at the bedding. Then he turned to look at Marcus with those deep, intelligent eyes, and Marcus could have sworn the horse understood every word he had said. They stood like that for a long moment, man and horse in the quiet of the barn, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside. Tom and Robert left as darkness fell, but not before Tom pulled Marcus aside. "You need anything, day or night, you call me. You've got my number. And Marcus, what you've done here, what you're still doing, it matters. Don't forget that." After they left, Marcus walked to the cottage that would now be his home. It was small but sturdy, with a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living area that looked out over the barn and pasture. Robert had left the utilities on, and the place was surprisingly clean, though it clearly hadn't been occupied in years. Marcus's few belongings looked lost in the empty rooms, but he didn't mind. He had never needed much. That first night in the cottage, Marcus found himself walking to the window every few minutes to check on Liberty. He could see the barn from his bedroom, could make out Liberty's silhouette in the stall through the window. Each time he looked, the horse was still there, real and safe. It wasn't a dream or a mirage. This was actually happening. Around midnight, Marcus gave up trying to sleep and walked out to the barn. Liberty raised his head when Marcus entered, nickering softly in greeting. Marcus sat down on a hay bale outside the stall, and they kept each other company in the peaceful darkness. The nightmares that usually plagued Marcus didn't come that night. Instead, he drifted in and out of a light doze, always aware of Liberty's presence, always comforted by the sound of the horse's breathing. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Marcus rose with the sun, made coffee, and headed to the barn for morning care. He fed Liberty a carefully measured breakfast, cleaned the stall, checked the wounds that continued to heal, and then took the horse for short walks around the property. Each day, Liberty grew a little stronger, moved a little more freely, and ventured a little farther from the barn. Dr. Chen continued her weekly visits, each time expressing amazement at Liberty's progress. "The weight gain is excellent," she reported during one visit. "His muscle tone is improving and those chain wounds are almost completely healed. Honestly, Marcus, I wasn't sure he would make it those first few days. But you've proven me wrong in the best possible way." Mike Patterson, the farrier, kept to his schedule of bi-weekly visits. Each session showed incremental improvement in Liberty's hooves. The cracks were healing, the angle was becoming more natural, and Liberty's gait was gradually normalizing. "It'll be a full year before we see the complete results," Mike told Marcus, "but I'm optimistic. This horse wants to be whole again. You can see it in the way he works with us." Marcus documented everything in a journal Dr. Chen had suggested he keep. He recorded Liberty's weight, his mood, his appetite, any changes in behavior or physical condition. But he also wrote about the small moments that didn't fit neatly into medical categories. The way Liberty waited by the fence in the mornings watching for Marcus to emerge from the cottage, the soft nickering that greeted him whenever he approached. The way Liberty rested his massive head on Marcus's shoulder when they stood together in the quiet of the barn. One morning, about 6 weeks after moving to the farm, Marcus witnessed something that filled his heart with joy. He had left Liberty's stall door open as usual, allowing the horse to go in and out as he pleased. When Marcus looked out the cottage window with his morning coffee, he saw Liberty in the middle of the pasture, not grazing but playing. The massive horse was trotting in circles, his head tossing, his tail raised in an expression of pure exuberance. It lasted only a minute before Liberty's weakened body tired, but in that minute, Marcus saw what Liberty had once been and what he could be again. Marcus grabbed his phone and managed to capture a few seconds of video before Liberty settled back into a calm walk. He watched the video over and over that evening, each viewing bringing tears to his eyes. This was more than physical healing. This was a spirit being reborn. The community continued to rally around Liberty's story. The local newspaper sent a reporter who wrote a touching article about the rescue. A television station from the nearest city came out to film a segment. Each story brought more support, more donations, more people stopping by to meet the horse who had survived the impossible. Marcus welcomed the visitors, understanding that Liberty's story gave people hope, showed them that healing was possible even after the deepest wounds. 3 months into Liberty's recovery, Marcus woke to find the horse lying down in his stall, unwilling to stand. Panic gripped his chest as he rushed to Liberty's side, his mind immediately going to the worst possibilities. The horse's breathing was labored and his eyes showed pain in a way Marcus had learned to recognize. He called Dr. Chen immediately, his hands shaking as he dialed. She arrived within the hour, her face serious as she examined Liberty. After a thorough assessment, she looked at Marcus with concern. "It's colic. His digestive system is still fragile from years of malnutrition and irregular feeding. We caught it early, which is good, but the next 24 hours are critical." Marcus felt his world tilt. After everything Liberty had been through, after all the progress they had made, the thought of losing him to a digestive crisis seemed unbearably cruel. What do we do? Dr. Chen laid out the treatment plan. Medication to manage the pain, fluids to prevent dehydration, and constant monitoring. We need to keep him moving if we can get him up. Walking helps with colic. And Marcus, you need to prepare yourself. This could go either way. For the next day and night, Marcus barely left Liberty's side. He administered medication on schedule, offered water constantly, and when Liberty finally struggled to his feet, Marcus walked him slowly around the paddock for hours. His own body ached with exhaustion, his legs trembled from the constant movement, but he didn't stop. Liberty needed him, and that was all that mattered. Tom arrived after hearing the news and took over walking duties so Marcus could rest for a few hours, but Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced in the cottage, checking his watch every few minutes, finally giving up and returning to the barn. Tom understood without words, simply handed over Liberty's lead rope and squeezed Marcus's shoulder in silent support. As the sun rose on the second day, Liberty began to show signs of improvement. His pain seemed less acute, and he was drinking water willingly. Dr. Chen returned for a follow-up examination and smiled with relief. "He's through the worst of it. The medication worked and your constant care made all the difference, but Marcus, we need to be more careful with his diet. His system is still healing, and it may always be sensitive." Marcus nodded, wiping exhaustion from his eyes. "Whatever it takes, just tell me what to do." The colic scare changed something in both Marcus and Liberty. The horse seemed to understand how close he had come to the edge, and his attachment to Marcus deepened even further. He became anxious whenever Marcus was out of sight for too long, calling out with worried whinnies until his person returned. And Marcus, who had spent years building walls around his heart, found those walls completely demolished by his love for this gentle giant. One evening, as Marcus sat on the fence watching Liberty graze peacefully in the golden light of sunset, Tom joined him. "You know people are talking," Tom said conversationally, "about you and Liberty, about how you've changed since you found him." Marcus glanced at his friend. "Changed how?" Tom smiled. "You smile now. You engage with people. Before you were here but not really here, you know? Like part of you was still somewhere else. But Liberty brought you back." Marcus considered this, watching Liberty's peaceful contentment as he grazed. "Maybe we brought each other back," he said quietly. "I saved him from that barn, but he saved me from something too. From being alone. From feeling like my life didn't have purpose anymore." The months continued to pass, and Liberty's transformation became more dramatic. By the 6th month, he had gained back almost all his lost weight. His coat gleamed white and healthy, and his hooves, while still requiring regular maintenance, allowed him to move with increasing ease. The scars from the chains would always be visible, but they had become part of his story rather than his identity. Marcus organized a small gathering at the farm to celebrate Liberty's 6-month recovery anniversary. Dr. Chen came, as did Mike Patterson, Tom and his family Robert, and many of the community members who had followed Liberty's journey. Young Emma, the girl who had visited early on, brought Liberty a special treat she had baked herself, apple cookies made with horse-safe ingredients. As everyone gathered around the pasture, watching Liberty graze contentedly, Dr. Chen raised a glass of lemonade. "To Liberty," she said, her voice carrying across the group, a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of compassion, and the incredible things that can happen when someone refuses to give up. "And to Marcus," Tom added, who saw a suffering creature and didn't look away. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the support, by the community that had rallied around this rescue. But his eyes were on Liberty, who had lifted his head and was watching the gathering with calm curiosity. The horse that had once trembled at every sound now stood peacefully surrounded by people trusting and unafraid. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Marcus walked Liberty around the property one last time before settling him in for the night. The routine had become sacred to both of them, this quiet time together as day faded into darkness. Marcus ran his hand along Liberty's neck, feeling the powerful muscles that had rebuilt themselves through careful nutrition and gentle exercise. "Do you remember that first day?" Marcus asked softly. "When I found you in that barn, I was so angry at whoever had done that to you, but now I'm almost grateful for that path that led us to each other. Does that make me terrible?" Liberty turned his head and gently nuzzled Marcus's chest, and Marcus laughed softly. "I'll take that as a no." As Marcus prepared to return to the cottage, Liberty did something he had never done before. Instead of going into his stall, the horse followed Marcus toward the cottage, walking right up to the porch steps. Marcus turned in surprise. "You want to stay close tonight?" Liberty simply stood there, calm and certain, his eyes reflecting the porch light. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat on the porch, and Liberty lowered his head so it rested on the railing near Marcus's shoulder. They stayed like that for over an hour, neither needing to move, both simply content in each other's presence. The nightmares that had plagued Marcus for years had become less frequent since Liberty entered his life, but that night one came anyway, vivid and terrible, pulling him from sleep with a strangled cry. He sat up in bed, heart racing, the images of lost friends and failed missions swirling in his mind. He stumbled to the window, needing air, needing to ground himself in the present. And there, illuminated by the moonlight, stood Liberty in the pasture, facing the cottage as if standing guard. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the horse's alert posture, his protective stance. It was as if Liberty sensed Marcus's distress and had positioned himself as a sentinel, watching over the man who had watched over him. Marcus felt the panic attack that had been building suddenly dissipate. He pulled on his boots and jacket and walked out to the pasture. Liberty nickered softly in greeting and lowered his head so Marcus could wrap his arms around the horse's neck. They stood together under the stars, two souls who had found each other in their darkest moments and had chosen to heal together. "Thank you," Marcus whispered into Liberty's mane. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for teaching me that broken things can become whole again." 1 year to the day after Marcus first discovered Liberty in that abandoned barn, he woke to a morning that felt charged with significance. The anniversary had been marked on his calendar for weeks, though he needed no reminder. Every detail of that first encounter remained burned into his memory with perfect clarity. The darkness of the barn, the sound of chains, the despair in Liberty's eyes, and the moment he decided that this suffering would end. Marcus walked to the barn as he did every morning, but today, Liberty wasn't waiting in his stall. A moment of old panic gripped Marcus's chest before he spotted the horse standing in the center of the pasture, silhouetted against the rising sun. Liberty's white coat, now pristine and gleaming, seemed to glow in the early light. His head was raised high, his posture proud and strong, and he was simply standing there as if waiting for this exact moment. As Marcus approached, Liberty turned and began walking toward him, not with the hesitant, painful steps of a year ago, but with the powerful, graceful stride of a healthy draft horse in his prime. Mike Patterson's patient work had paid off. Liberty's hooves were sound, his gait even and sure. The chains had left their scars, visible rings around his neck and legs that would never fully disappear, but they had become badges of survival rather than marks of shame. "Good morning, old friend," Marcus said as Liberty reached him. "Happy anniversary." Liberty lowered his massive head, and Marcus wrapped his arms around the horse's neck in their customary morning greeting. The horse's coat was soft under his hands, smelling of fresh hay and sunshine, so different from the matted, filthy creature he had first encountered. They stood like that for several minutes, man and horse, beginning their day the way they always did, with quiet connection and mutual trust. Dr. Chen had scheduled a final comprehensive examination for that afternoon, a full-year checkup to document Liberty's recovery. When she arrived, she brought a photographer from the local newspaper and a veterinary student she was mentoring. The student, a young woman named Jessica, had asked specifically to meet Liberty after reading about his case in veterinary journals where Dr. Chen had documented the rescue and rehabilitation. "This is remarkable," Jessica said, circling Liberty with wide eyes. "I've studied the initial examination photos and the progression images. The transformation is almost unbelievable." Dr. Chen smiled as she began her examination. "Liberty is a testament to what proper care, dedication, and love can accomplish. But more than that, he's proof that even the most severe neglect and trauma can be overcome with time and commitment." The examination took over an hour, and when Dr. Chen finally stepped back, she was beaming. "Marcus, I'm happy to report that Liberty is in excellent health. His weight is perfect for his size and breed. His heart and lungs are strong. The old wounds have healed completely. His hooves, while they'll always require careful maintenance, are structurally sound. From a medical standpoint, Liberty is no longer a rescue case. He's simply a healthy, well-cared-for horse." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He had hoped for this outcome, had worked toward it every single day, but hearing it confirmed by the veterinarian who had been with them from the beginning made it real in a way nothing else could. That evening, Tom and his family came for a celebration dinner. Robert joined them, bringing his wife and grandchildren who had become regular visitors to the farm. The children loved Liberty, and the gentle giant seemed to have infinite patience for their excited chatter and gentle pats. Emma, now 11, had become Liberty's unofficial junior caretaker, visiting several times a week to help with grooming and feeding. As they sat around a bonfire in the yard, the barn visible in the background with Liberty contentedly grazing nearby, Tom raised his glass. "A year ago, you found a dying horse and refused to let him die. You gave up your old life, moved to this farm, and dedicated yourself to saving a creature most people would have written off as hopeless. But you didn't just save Liberty, Marcus. You saved yourself, too." Marcus looked around at these people who had become his family, at the farm that had become his home, and at Liberty, who had become his reason for everything. "You're right," he said quietly. "I went into that barn looking for a horse in trouble, but I found so much more. I found purpose, I found community, I found peace." The local news station had asked to do a follow-up story on Liberty's one-year anniversary, and Marcus had agreed on the condition that they use the story to raise awareness about animal neglect. The segment aired a week later, showing Liberty's transformation through photos and video clips, but what resonated most with viewers was the footage of Marcus and Liberty together, the obvious bond between them, the way the massive horse followed Marcus like a devoted dog, the gentle way they interacted. The story went viral on social media, shared thousands of times across the country. Messages poured in from people inspired by Liberty's survival and Marcus's dedication. Several were from other veterans who said the story had given them hope, shown them that healing was possible even when the wounds ran deep. Others were from animal lovers, wanting to know how they could help rescue animals in their own communities. Marcus hadn't expected to become any kind of spokesman or inspiration, but he recognized an opportunity to do good. Working with Dr. Chen and local animal welfare organizations, he helped establish a program connecting rescue animals with veterans suffering from PTSD. The healing power he had experienced with Liberty could be replicated, could help others find their way back from the darkness. 6 months after the anniversary, Marcus stood in the pasture watching Liberty interact with a new arrival, a neglected mare that a veteran named James had agreed to foster and rehabilitate. James, who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, had been skeptical at first, but Marcus saw the same transformation beginning to take place. The focus required to care for the mare was pulling James out of his isolation, giving him purpose beyond his own pain. Liberty had taken on an unexpected role as a mentor of sorts to the rescue horses that now occasionally stayed at the farm during their rehabilitation. His calm presence seemed to soothe them, His survival gave them hope, and Marcus marveled at how the horse who had suffered so much now offered comfort to others. On quiet evenings, Marcus still sat on the porch with Liberty nearby, still talked to him about everything and nothing, still felt that deep connection that had saved them both. The nightmares had become rare. The anxiety that had plagued him for years had lessened to manageable levels, and for the first time since returning from war, Marcus felt truly at home in his own life. Liberty would always bear the physical scars of his decade in chains. The marks would never fully fade, and his hooves would always need careful attention. But those scars had become part of a larger story, one of survival and redemption, of the transformative power of compassion, and of the unbreakable bonds that can form between broken souls who choose to heal together. As Marcus watched the sun set over the pasture, Liberty grazing peacefully in the golden light, he thought about that morning 1 year ago when he had walked into a dark barn and found a dying horse. He had gone in thinking he might save an animal. He had come out with so much more. He had found his purpose, his peace, and his path forward. See, the veteran and the horse, both survivors of different wars, had saved each other. And in doing so, they had created something beautiful from something broken, proving that with love, patience, and unwavering commitment, even the deepest wounds can heal, and new life can bloom from the ashes of suffering.